Have you ever heard of the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in one part of the world can cause a hurricane in another? This may seem like an exaggerated concept, but it's a real scientific theory that has been studied and tested for decades. The butterfly effect is the concept that small changes can have large effects. It suggests that a small change in one place can lead to big changes in another, often unexpected. The term itself was coined by Edward Lorenz, a meteorologist who first proposed the idea in the 1960s. To understand the butterfly effect, let's consider an example. Imagine you're driving to work and you take a slightly different route than usual. Maybe you get stuck in traffic, or maybe you arrive a few minutes early. Those few minutes could lead to a different set of events for the rest of your day. Maybe you miss a meeting, which is obviously a bad outcome, or you have the chance to encounter someone that changes your life for better or for worse, all because of a small decision you made that morning. This same idea applies to many other situations, including weather patterns, economic systems, and even human behavior. For example, a small change in temperature in one part of the ocean can alter the currents and cause a storm on the other side of the world. Similarly, a small shift in consumer behavior can impact the entire economy, as you'd know if you're part of the whole investor stat game like I am. The butterfly effect reminds us that everything is interconnected and that small actions can have big consequences. I was overthinking the other day, during my exam period actually, and I realized this might make for an intriguing YouTube video. Everything can be a butterfly effect if you overthink things, but I figure it'll be a good message for my audience in particular, as it shows how small decisions and small steps forward can have a drastically positive impact on your life overall. What I mean by this is you deciding to sign up to a certain club one afternoon at university, or even that night, can eventually lead to you getting your dream career. You'll know what I mean once you watch this video. Or by one message not sending due to your internet cutting out, can lead you to having the best physique of your life. Again, you will understand what I mean when you hear me out. So, I will go over 5 specific scenarios that happened in my life and how they drastically changed the trajectory of my life. All of these decisions were almost split-second decisions, and if not, they were decisions made in the span of a single afternoon or a single night. They weren't decisions I pondered over several days, weeks, or even months. These were true butterfly effects. If you're a basketball fan, you may have heard of a channel called Cosgrove. He has a few videos on butterfly effects in the NBA. Some notable ones were how 4 missed free throws led to the Kobe and Shaq dynasty, or a Miami Heat player being 10 seconds late to practice one day led to the Cavs 2016 championship. Now, my butterfly effects obviously didn't have consequences that large. I'm sure more people care about the LA three-peat in the early 2000s and the Cavs 2016 championship, the best final series ever, than they do about my life. But this paints the picture of how seemingly inconsequential these events seemed at the time, but looking back, these were massive butterfly effects. Scenario 1, a chilled out afternoon at uni. So one afternoon when I was still a university student in 2018, I was sitting in like this lounge area. They had microwaves for students to heat up their food and couches to sit on. I honestly cannot remember what I was doing there. Looking back, I'm thinking maybe I was waiting for Dad to pick me up or waiting for the bus. As my first almost 2 years of uni, I didn't have my license despite being 18 to 19 years old. Story for another day. But this was 2018. I got my license in 2016, so this can't be it. I was thinking maybe I was waiting around for a lecture, but if that was the case, I think I'd be in the library, not in the lounge. It wasn't gym related since in the uni days I gym earlier in the day, and if I had gym later on, why would I be hanging around uni when I could be on my way to the gym? It can have been waiting around for a university club meeting since I wasn't involved in one at the time. My best guess is I was waiting around for basketball, since I was still playing ball back then, and I wasn't driving 30 minutes back home and then 30 minutes back into town for the game. But ultimately, I cannot recall why I was waiting around in that particular area. It could have been because I just finished food and was scrolling through social media. Regardless, at this time, I am waiting on these couches at uni. There is one other student around. this other girl sitting a few rows in front of me. Eventually, this older lady who works for the university and another student come along, and they start talking to this other girl. I had my headphones in, so I wasn't quite catching what they were talking about, but eventually I decide this is worth listening to. So I turn my music/video volume right down to eavesdrop, as you do. They were essentially trying to pitch their club to this other girl. It seemed as if they were looking for volunteers to go overseas. I also hear them try to catch my attention. I keep my head down, focused on my phone, pretending I didn't hear them. From their point of view, they can't see my AirPods, since my hair is like on the longer side. I have like wings as a part of my hairstyle. So from their end, it seems as if I am completely ignoring them. Technically I am, since I can hear them, but I'm choosing to stay out of this conversation for now. Since I heard something about going overseas. No thanks. If you call my earlier videos on my failures in life, you'll know that 2018 was a turnaround year for me. I had such good momentum on my studies, gym, work. I wasn't going to let a trip overseas for a few months derail my progress, especially since it seemed like it was volunteer work. You know, the type of thing where you clean up impoverished communities. As selfish as that sounds, and as selfish as this is going to sound, there is no way I was going to jeopardize my income, which would mean I was going to take unpaid annual leave from the supermarket, especially since I worked hard to get my current contracted hours. My gym, especially since this is the first time in my life where you could consider me ripped/jacked. Or my studies, since for the first time since primary school or year 7 I was going well with my studies. So I proceed to say nothing. After they try to get my attention and the older staff members say, "He's ignoring us," they continue on with talking to the other student. So far, it seems it's more volunteer work. I maybe heard something about resume experience/extra credit. Maybe it could be considered as a unit towards your degree. But again, I'm not going to derail what I have going now for some extra resume credit. I never thought about this at the time, since the whole concept of the game of life is only new to me. Hence why this brand is only a couple of years old instead of being 5+ years old. But I wasn't going to maximize the career stat with extra credit at the cost of money or my aesthetic stat, which would mean no supermarket work, so no money for a few months, and same with gym. I had the diversified approach to life years ago, but I never treated it as a game. So anyway, they once again try to get my attention, but again, I ignore them. And once again, they say, "He's still ignoring us." Eventually, they finish their spiel and they leave. They give their contact details to this girl, since, you know, agreeing to go overseas for a few months from some people you just met isn't going to happen. She's going to need time to ponder over this. So, I see the staff member and other student walking off. Like I see it at the corner of my eye. I decide to raise my head and look at them. The staff member points at me and goes, "You shouldn't have ignored me," in like a joking, friendly sort of way. So I take out my AirPods and I show them. I'm like, "Oh no, I wasn't ignoring you, I had my AirPods in." And they're like, "Ah, right." After they realize I wasn't being rude, even though technically I was, then they mentioned something about getting details from the other girl, the one they were pitching to. So those two leave, and I'm sitting there for a few minutes, carrying on with whatever it was I was doing. And then I stop and think, I recall something in that conversation they had that intrigued me. I cannot remember what it was, but at the time it was enough for me to walk over to the other girl and say, "Hey, do you have the details from the other two?" So she gave me the email from the staff member. We briefly had a chat about what it was they were after, but from memory, she said she wasn't actually sure. So I got the email from her and was like, I'll maybe possibly consider the potential thought of dealing with this later. I can't remember if it was on a piece of paper or a picture on my phone, but that's irrelevant. And yes, I went up to this random girl and started talking. Yes, there was a reason, getting those details, but it's not that tough, fellas. However, this was in 2018. You know, before TikTok. These days, there's a chance I get exposed on a TikTok video for going up to random girls and talking to them. So if this was 2023, chances are this butterfly effect never happens. What butterfly effect gamification? You've spent the last few minutes talking about some conversation. I'm getting there. The reason I mentioned all of this is that it really shows how very easily I could have not gotten that email. I could have kept my head down when they walked off. I could have not asked that girl for that email. I could not have even been in the lounge at that time, since I really do not know why I was there as opposed to literally anywhere else. So let's move on with this story. Later that night after I got home, I decided to send that email address and, well, email. I honestly think maybe I had basketball that night because I recall being home later than usual for a uni day. I don't think I was hanging around for a lecture, otherwise I probably would have sent that email during the lecture. So anyway, I decide to introduce myself. I'm like, hey, I'm insert name here, I'm the guy who was on the couches this afternoon. Could you please provide me more details on what your club/event is about? Since that's all the info I gathered from eavesdropping and from talking to that other girl on the couches. Not the casting couches, unfortunately. Again, butterfly effect. The decision to send that one email, I could have just not sent that email. Why was that email important? Well, the response I got was along the lines of what the club was about. Turns out it was a university club, which I didn't really know at the time, and that they were potentially looking for an executive member at the club. They mentioned treasurer and secretary. Maybe there were other positions, but I only recall treasurer and secretary because I wanted to be treasurer. Since I was doing an accounting degree, treasurer is more transferable experience than secretary, but I ended up with secretary. Now, this is where the butterfly effect kicks in. I decide to meet up with her within the next week at the university library cafe, and then I officially sign up to the club. Yes, now that's more workload, but the potential of becoming treasurer/secretary was worth it for me. They're like, if you show up to events and do the work in the club, you'll get a good shot at that position. So it's not like I signed up and then I was automatically treasurer. Like, you still had to prove yourself and prove your worth. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of unpaid, unrecognized work before you get that position. I mean, the whole thing was unpaid, but the point is I had to put in work, like free work, to get that position. Much the same way you do a lot of things in life. Like, you put a lot of work in the gym before you actually see progress. You do a lot of study before you see the passing results on your exam. You put out a lot of YouTube videos that don't get any views until eventually your channel gets good enough to get views, stuff like that. I think they initially just purely only wanted more members as opposed to, wanting people to be executive members at the club. But I imagine the staff member needed some extra bait to entice new members, which was the whole executive member thing. She never said, executive member for your resume, but anyone who's into the whole career thing knows that you gun for these roles for the sake of your resume. You may enjoy the work and the challenge, but ultimately it's for your resume. So, I'd go on about how I helped out at some events, attended the AGM, annual general meeting, and got voted into the secretary position, but that's a story for another day. Otherwise, this will drag out to another hour-long video. If you want to know that story, let me know in the comments. But basically, if you're in this position yourself, it's quite easy to do this type of work for uni clubs. You get a lot of assistance from the staff at your university in these things. So let's elaborate further. Why was this executive member thing such a big deal? Well, because it added a big part of my resume that helped me stand out from other applicants for jobs. My first ever accounting job I got that by having a standout resume from other entry-level applicants. That first accounting job added more padding to my resume, coupled with my eventual internship at the Australian Taxation Office, led me to having one of the best resumes in the region in terms of entry-level applicants. Getting the ATO internship essentially happened due to me attending workshops during the trimester break, which made me known amongst the university staff who deal with students and internships and jobs in the region, etc. So that wasn't that big of a butterfly effect. Like, it kind of is, but it's not as big as this one. But regardless, this executive position had a huge impact on my resume and my career as a whole. It's still on my resume, albeit it takes up a small piece of it, but it created some stepping stones to where I am now. At the time of writing this script, I'm in the midst of a promotion at work, and after I get that, which it's almost guaranteed, I have another stage that will lead me to becoming the company accountant, which entails a juicy pay rise. So to recap, one decision to put my head up and acknowledge someone led me to becoming a secretary for a university club, which led me to getting entry-level jobs. Those entry-level jobs led me to getting noticed by recruiters on job websites, which introduced me to the role I have now, which I enjoy, and the income from this job and my supermarket job is allowing me to break into the real estate game here in Australia, without a significant other. And if you live here, especially around the eastern capital cities, you'll know that's a borderline impossible feat. By deciding to send that email, by deciding to go ask that girl, whoever she was, for those details, by deciding to eavesdrop, by deciding to put my head up to acknowledge them as they walked off, by deciding to be in that lounge area at that particular day, at that particular time, despite the fact there are next to no reasons for me being there, those tiny in-the-moment decisions quite possibly led me to where I am now. Without that extra resume experience, I quite possibly don't get called up for an interview at my first job. Since, back then, my resume was only different due to study abroad, certain CPA recognised units at the uni, and the executive position. And I doubt the uni subjects and study abroad was enough to get me an interview. Having stuff like the supermarket and playing sports isn't that different for your resume, it doesn't make that much of a difference. So I firmly believe that executive position held up my resume in the earlier years of my career stat. Without that first job, I likely don't get my second job. The internship was a big factor, but I very much doubt I'd get the second job without my first job. Without that second job I had, I don't get noticed by recruiters for this current job. Without this current job, I have no land, I don't have a career path as good as the one I'm on now, a massive chunk of my career and investor stat, and hell, even sexual market value since I'd have no land/real estate. All that would be gone if I didn't make those small decisions that day. Now you could argue that things would have turned out either way, or I would have eventually gotten to where I am, but I honestly doubt it. I would have had to struggle getting the first job, and knowing the accounting profession, I'd have a job with a worse environment and less career growth as a whole. So that goes to show how, by not being lazy, it can have a massive positive impact on your life. It was very easy to not send that email and just carry on with my life. It was very easy to just watch some YouTube for those 5 minutes instead of taking the time to log onto my university emails and send that email. So next time you're thinking about putting off that small task, think of this story. Perhaps just doing that small task will lead you to an exponential increase in your quality of life. I assure you, those 5 minutes I would have spent on YouTube otherwise would not have done anything even remotely this great for me. Scenario 2. 3 seconds is all it takes. So while we are on the fact that I probably won't be at my current job without some small changes in my life earlier, I'll touch on a small split-second decision that resulted in me getting my current job also. As mentioned, I got this job via recruiters recommending it to me. So one afternoon in early November of 2020, I get an email from a recruiter about a position, the one I'm currently in. Now, no disrespect to my current organisation, but they didn't advertise it as effectively as they could. The job sounded a lot more harsh than it actually is. I mean, fine by me, that probably turned off some potential candidates, which means I had weaker competition. But anyway, why I bring that up is because I initially wasn't keen on this role. If I knew exactly what it was like, I would have 110% said yes. But again, the way it was advertised and the job description didn't sell it well. So I'm on the phone with a recruiter one afternoon in my study area, and she's mentioning stuff about the role. She doesn't seem to quite understand the role either, which is fair enough. You can only go off the information you're given. Anyway, at one point in the call, she says, "Is this a role you'd be interested in?" I pause for 3 seconds. It felt like 3 minutes in my head. And I say, "Yeah, I'd be interested." I say this very unconvincingly. It's more like, yeah, I'd be interested. I guess the recruiter couldn't hear my tone through the phone. That or she didn't care. So anyway, we carry on with the application process. I get the job, the rest is history. Now, why is this a butterfly effect? Because I almost said no. Duh. If I had said no after those 3 seconds, then okay, phone call ends, no job, no career progress, no real estate, no gamification of life as we know it. And that's not even a stretch. Without my other stats falling into place, I probably don't get the ambition to strive further and create this brand, but that's a story for another day. Okay, so you might be asking, why did I consider saying no? Yes, it was advertised poorly, but surely a job's a job, right? It'll get the relatives off your back rather than working part-time in the supermarket, because you know how your relatives and your parents and your uncles and aunties are when you're working a part-time job. Well, because I was very discouraged after losing my second accounting job. I likely already showed the videos where I go over it, but I have a couple of videos where I mention how I lost my first accounting job, which really discouraged me, but it wasn't the end of the world since, although I took a hit to the bank account and career, I had an internship shortly after which covered the career stat, and I had a lot more spare time to enjoy the tail end of my uni degree without that job. But losing my second job was a massive blow. I was out of uni, I had curated a routine and an identity around having this job and working 7 days a week, as well as the income from having those two jobs. I'd never earned that much in my life, obviously, and that got rug pulled out from under me. Unless you've been through this before, maybe you don't understand the magnitude of how terrible this is for someone, but pouring salt on this open wound, this was the second job I lost before my probation ended. At this time I felt, maybe I'm not cut out for this. The system is rigged against me. The universe is out to get me. They're giving me this lollipop only to take it away from me. If you give a baby a lollipop, then you yank it away from them, they get upset. But if you never give them the lollipop in the first place, they have nothing to cry about. So after I lost the second job, I spent 2 straight days in my room watching The Simpsons, drowning in my sorrows, story for another time, but I told myself, if I lose one more accounting job, I'm gonna self-delete myself, or I'm just going to give up, work part-time in the supermarket, go ham on gym, be a low-income earner but be fucking ripped. Anytime some relative says something along the lines of, so how's your career going? Or when are you leaving the supermarket? I'll say, I fucking tried, there's no point, it's a rigged system. I had worked way too hard and it got me nowhere. My mummy and daddy don't own the company and my best mate isn't manager at the big company incorporated, so what's the fucking point? I also told myself, early to mid 2020, that I wouldn't bother looking again for a full-time accounting job until the end of 2021 at least. But here I am in late 2020, being introduced to a role about 1 year earlier than I originally expected. I'm like, oh great, now I won't get any sleep-ins for a job I don't even want, and they're probably going to fire me in 4 months anyway. But in those 3 seconds I decide, hey, experience is experience, and also this job was originally only advertised as a 12-month contract. Worst case, I suck shit for 12 months, get some money, stack my resume, and then go back to chilling for a bit until I fully get my mind right. And they were advertising like slightly above $50,000, which is a lot of money for me back then. I mean, it is a lot of money depending on your location. So for me, there was slightly more reasons to say yes than no. But if I forgot about those reasons and was in more of a depressed mood on that particular day, I'd be more pessimistic and I likely would have said no. And then I wouldn't be where I am now. No enhanced career, money or investor stats. And quite possibly no brand either, since I only really got the idea for this brand once my other stats were falling into place. A 3-second decision resulted in a major butterfly effect. 3 seconds is all it takes. Scenario 3. Spontaneous application. So the first scenario was in 2018, and the second scenario was in 2020. Let's go further back now, all the way back to 2012. I was still in high school in year 10. If you saw my 5 jobs before I was 16 video, you'll know that job number 3 was as a kitchen hand at a local restaurant. I was shit at that job, story for another time, but this particular restaurant is quiet during the winter months, so less shifts. In fact, no shifts. So one afternoon I was thinking, what if I apply at the local supermarket? I recall when I was 12, I was like, hell no, I'm not working at the local supermarket because my mum was having a conversation with me about getting a job when I turned 15 at the local supermarket. Like, I'm literally 12 and you're already talking to me about getting a job. Yes, it's local and convenient, but I hated that idea. But she didn't care because it was convenient for her. Maybe mum and dad shouldn't have decided to move to the middle of butt-fuck nowhere if you were so eager for your kids to get a job. Whatever, rant for another day. The reason I didn't want the local job was, I don't know about you, But when you grow up ugly and non-white in an almost 100% white town, you get quite self-conscious. And I didn't want to be working in a local area where everyone would know who I was, especially since I was also obviously shy. If someone started arcing up, I'd have no idea how to react. I'd honestly probably would have cried back then. Now, as a Sigma Alpha Chaos Super Mega Evolved Chad, I don't care, and I'm quite confident and can handle myself in those situations, but back then, no chance. But anyway, I was like, YOLO, I'll apply at the supermarket. It was almost a way to kill time that afternoon. I'm surprised I did, since I was still the shy type who hated it when people saw me outside of school, which didn't make sense since I was a basketball referee. Way more abuse than a supermarket, and you'd see even more people you knew. But I guess it was more so the local girls in my area. I didn't want them seeing me at work. They'd see me at the supermarket, but they wouldn't see me at the basketball stadium because they, didn't play basketball, let alone play in the little boys' league that I was refereeing. Yes, it's odd. I think it was more so just being shy overall. Maybe I thought it was unattractive being at work since none of the jocks had jobs at the time, as far as I knew. I don't know how my 15-year-old brain was operating, but regardless, I decided in a spur-of-the-moment decision to apply there. Got the job due to the fact I had 4 jobs prior, and I told them I was available all the time. I told them I applied there since there was the capability to work way more hours than all of my other jobs, and the rest is history. I stuck with that job, obviously, slowly got the hours that worked in my favour. When you start out, you need to work around the company. But once everyone leaves and you become the better worker by default, you get the first option for the longer shifts, and now I have a full-day weekend contract. You may think that's a bad thing. I see that as a great thing. I have guaranteed income that helps me get into real estate. Without this, I wouldn't have enough to break into that market. And once you're in real estate, you're in. Equity in your property only increases, providing you have actual land. If you have an apartment, that's a different story. So you use that equity to get more land years down the track, or another house, rent that out, especially with the upcoming housing shortage in Australia, the rental crisis due to the real estate market and increased migration, collapsing building companies, government/council regulations causing supply crunches, the companies who own the land slowly releasing land to milk out profits. All of that stuff combined screws over the average man, or the average person. Sorry, gender fluids. But if you have real estate here in Australia, you're laughing at this. You're laughing maniacally. But you benefit from all of these factors. If I didn't make that decision to apply at the supermarket, maybe I wouldn't have weekend income now. Or at least one as stable and with as many hours as the one I have now. Which has helped me crack into the real estate market while there was still some hope. Any salary increase in my accounting job wouldn't be enough to keep up with the rising real estate/housing costs here in Australia. So, butterfly effect, an afternoon decision to apply for a job I wasn't too keen on getting, led me to earning 6 figures way earlier in my life than otherwise, leading me to get into real estate way earlier than otherwise, maybe even at all. And even if I did get into real estate otherwise, it wouldn't be in an area as nice as mine, or I wouldn't have land the size of mine. I'd have something much smaller. Scenario 4. A failed message, a whole new identity. Keeping in 2012 here, I had a girlfriend, my only serious relationship. I had a girlfriend in 2014 for literally a week, story for another time if you're interested, but I don't count that. My only girlfriend was for 9 months, April 2012 till like January 2013 or something. So we start having some issues in the relationship towards the end of 2012. Again, story for another time, but this one afternoon I was making a custom-made laptop background. Normally people have a picture of their family or a partner or something, but I made this collage of everything I cared about in my life at this stage. And at that time that involved Pokemon and basketball and other stuff like money. I had like all of my Pokemon in my PC in Pokemon Platinum, like my battling teams and whatnot, my favorite basketball players. I even had Michaela Maroney. I had a massive crush on her back then. At the time, there was a not impressed meme of her back then. So I had her on the collage, and of course I had my girlfriend. I was telling her about this collage. She knew about my Michaela Maroney thing, but she was also into like One Direction, especially Niall Horan, so it's all cool. But anyway, I was telling her about this, and I was like, oh, I should get you a bigger part of this collage, since the Pokemon took up a fair bit. And she said something like, "Oh, it's okay, I don't need a big part of your collage." And I replied with, "But you are a big part of my life, love heart." Now, back then, we had the shittest internet reception, since we live in the middle of nowhere. Well, it's still bad, but it was even worse back then. Our internet would cut out for a few minutes at a time every now and then. So when I sent this message, the internet cut out and it didn't send. Now, I didn't notice this at the time, and the conversation continued. Not sure how I didn't notice it, but either way, that message didn't send. Now, how is this a butterfly effect? Well, as mentioned, we were going through some issues. We had some major fights the weeks prior to this, and we had a couple more the following couple of weeks later, and the relationship ended about a month after this day. Now, if this message sent, maybe it changes the trajectory of our relationship, since we didn't have any lovey-dovey conversations during that time. Like, it wasn't a part of the natural conversations. You don't just randomly go, "Oh my god, I love you so much," randomly. It comes up in a conversation in certain times. Maybe you can argue you can say that randomly. I had a female friend who didn't like when her ex-boyfriend did that. But again, you have many different females saying many different things, so take that with a grain of iodized table salt. Anyway, wasn't our style. Maybe if that message came up, we don't break up a month later, since it might change the trajectory of our relationship. Since the last month was a lot of negative, maybe this positive spins it. Since seeing a message about her being a big part of my life, despite a lot of recent fighting, changes things. Just because I'm mad doesn't mean I stop caring. Now, this may be a stretch in your opinion, but without giving you the whole story, I firmly believe this could have changed the trajectory of the relationship in the coming weeks. Who knows where that relationship could have ended up if it worked out. But anyway, let's move on. So this wasn't just a relationship ending, it was the beginning of a massive change in my life. So obviously a relationship ending is usually a big deal for someone, but I see quite a lot of times, in my life at least, the people around me sort of just move on. They find a new relationship in a month or so, or maybe even less, and hey presto, the old partner has been replaced. Move on. So yeah, maybe they were disheartened with their breakup, but they're basically back to square one a month later. Not in my case. My first and only breakup, I felt very depressed the entire year afterwards. Now the whole thing is a story for another time, including how I was on a holiday a week after we broke up, and now my ex got with her friend, even though she insisted he was just a friend, and how her friendship group split in half after we broke up since she turned into a huge bitch, and I got infuriated every time I heard anything about her and what she'd say and do. Even our few conversations after we broke up, I was seething. But again, story for another time. So regulars know I'm a gym rat, yeah? Guess how this started? Yep, bingo, this breakup. I recall seeing a picture of her friend with his shirt off at the time, and he looked ripped, so this got me fucking furious. Now looking back, he was just like skinny and it was like decent lighting. He had like a semblance of a chest and some abs, but that's like most skinny guys. It's just that I was super skinny when I started, like no pecs and no abs. I don't have any pics since I was so self-conscious. I would never have pics with my shirt off. You see with a lot of fitness influencers who use their before pics, they had no shirt on, and they talk about how they were self-conscious. Well, I was so self-conscious I'd never take a picture with my shirt off. Now I have no issue with it, Lamau, but back then, no chance. Anyway, that paints the scene. My ex got with the friend guy who was more ripped than me. Fuck this guy, I'll get big and fight him. That's how I got started. Now this was year 11. I got a few months in and kind of just gave up. Or at the very least I was super inconsistent. Eventually I found this meme on Facebook that involved Ziz, and I was like, God damn, who is this? He looks insane. And that's when I started getting consistent again. I didn't make good progress for a long time, but I gained the discipline and consistency during that time period, which is arguably the most important part. Ziz wasn't the reason I started, but he was the reason I kept going. My ex was the reason I started. So that gym start has had an enormous impact on my life. Most people at my supermarket job and uni only know me as ripped, or at the very least they know me as a gym guy. They never knew me as a skinny twig. And that's nothing to say of all the other events in my life that were only possible due to gym, or they were drastically enhanced due to gym. Those are also stories for another time. So, if that one message sent, perhaps the relationship continues. I don't have a reason to start gym, since my ex wasn't fit by any means, but then again, neither was I. I'm not considered a gym rat if we don't break up. My quality of life is drastically decreased. Oh, but you had a girlfriend, your quality of life should be enhanced. Well, perhaps, but I'll tell you, being ripped is better than having a girlfriend. You can have both and maybe your life will be even better. I've never had both at the same time, so I can't speak for that behalf, and the whole girlfriend thing or no girlfriend thing is a topic for another day, but I firmly believe being ripped enhances your life much more than having a significant other. So, that one message not sending drastically improved my life. Heaps of people around my area aren't ripped. Maybe if you live on like the Gold Coast in Australia or Los Angeles in the US, being ripped is the norm, but it's certainly not in my area in Victoria. Whether you care about social status or not is your choice, but I do to an extent, and it definitely positively impacts your mental health. So, one message created a positive butterfly effect on my life. Scenario 5. One letter for life. Sticking to the relationship thing, how my girlfriend and I started out was I wrote her a Valentine's letter. I went to an all-boys school and she went to an all-girls school. I got our mutual friend to drop off the note in her locker. Story for another day, but that's how it started. Anyway, at my 16th, she brought her friends along, and I brought my friends along. Obviously. Her best friend at the time and my best friend at the time both attended. We both talked up the other guy/girl to each other, and my friend was like, the whole time, oh, she's probably not even that good. Like, he just wasn't impressed. Anyway, they meet at the party, and after the party, he's like, you've got to introduce me to insert my girlfriend's friend's name here. Like, they maybe talked in amongst the group, but they didn't talk one-on-one. Remember, this is a 16th birthday. This was in 2012 before people probably talked a lot on social media. Like, you'd know mutual friends of your friends on social media before you knew them in person. That happens a lot these days, but it didn't happen back then. At least if you weren't like a jock or a slut, you didn't really do that sort of thing. And also, keep in mind, these are also my friends, you know, the timid guys, and my girlfriend's friends at the time. So again, timid. Anyway, they both turn out interested in each other. We set them both up, and to this day, they're still together. They're currently engaged. They were both each other's only partner, only sexual partner, only anything, only kiss, etc. A very nice traditional high school sweetheart relationship. That friend and I bump into each other at the supermarket whenever he's shopping and I'm working, but we don't talk anymore despite being best friends in primary school and high school. We basically drifted apart after uni since we went to different universities. But his work and his fiancée are basically his whole life now, and they would have never met if I had never had that relationship with my ex-girlfriend. And that would have never happened if I never decided to write that Valentine's letter that night of the 13th of Feb 2012. If I recall correctly, that was a spur-of-the-moment decision, just like my earlier butterfly effects too. So you could even go as far as to say, without that letter, I wouldn't have become a gym rat, and my old best friend's life would have been drastically different. So next time you put off that small task because you don't think it's a big deal, or you're too lazy, or you'd rather do something else, think about these 5 scenarios. You may just be passing up a butterfly effect that positively changes the trajectory of your life. If I never wrote that letter, if that message sent, perhaps I'm not the gym rat you see before you today. If I decide not to apply at the supermarket job that one afternoon because I let my past timid nature get the better of me, I likely don't have that second job on the weekend now that is allowing me to get into real estate. And this, in itself, is sure to enhance my quality of life over the next few years when my house is eventually built. If I decided to say no to that job offer I was almost too discouraged and lazy to go for, I wouldn't be in the midst of becoming the company accountant at my workplace, and possibly wouldn't have a chilled out job like mine that still allows me to continue my gym routine, listen to stock market stuff at work, and gives me the capability to work on this brand after work. If I decided to ignore that one staff member that one weekday afternoon at uni, if I never decided to go to that one girl with the email details, if I never sent that email, who knows how long it would have taken me to break into my accounting career. I likely have a much higher stress, worse job that pays worse, meaning I don't have enough to get into real estate. and I don't have the capability to work the second job on the weekend. You could even look back at that Valentine's letter. If I never wrote that, I never have the girlfriend. If I never have the girlfriend, I never have the breakup, meaning I never become a gym rat. If I don't become the gym rat, I don't have the confidence. If I don't have the confidence, I don't have the confidence to go and talk to that girl sitting on that couch out of the blue, meaning I'm too timid to get that email address, meaning I never gained that much needed experience for my resume, meaning I'm not where I am today. Crazy how one small decision in a small amount of time can make life-changing alterations to your life. So, let me know what butterfly effects you believe you've had in your life, and don't skip that small task. Remember, that could be a butterfly effect in itself. Thanks for watching. That is all.